Welcome back to the autumn 2024 season of Tansson Talks. I always appreciate your support. I'm Brandon, the host and producer of this show, and I always love doing this. So today, I'm excited to welcome back one of my former podcast guests, Amanda Grover. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to reconnect with you after a few years.
Yeah, I'm so excited to reconnect with you as well. I know the last time that we spoke was on my Brand's Corner podcast, and now I am. This is now number 95 of my new Tansson Talks show, so it's exciting to see sort of our personal progressions there.
Yeah, definitely. And episode 95 is definitely something to be proud of, especially it being your not your first podcast.
Thank you so much. And before we get started, I did want to allow for you to, of course, reintroduce yourself for the watching or listening audience here today, and I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, definitely. So, hello everyone. I'm Amanda Grover, founder of Storytellers Grove. I am a brand strategist and yoga teacher. My career started off in the public relations and influencer marketing agency spaces. And I am really grateful for the experiences that I've had in those agency environments. But throughout those experiences, I felt the pull to start something on my own. I am really passionate about wellness and making sure that people feel their best as they possibly can throughout their days. I think that it's important to live a life of purpose and fulfillment, rather than getting stuck into the day to day things that a lot of times cause us stress. And so now at my work, at Storytellers Grove, I really blend my passion for wellness through incorporating some things I learned through my yoga teacher training, and then also bring in the experiences that I've had in influencer marketing and public relations. And the reason why I think yoga works so well with public relations and influencer marketing and building brands is because a lot of times when people want to build brands and follow things that they're passionate about, a lot of fears come up and a lot of doubts, like even just being on podcasts. I've been on a few now. I host my own, so it seems like second nature to me. But sometimes when I'm speaking with other people, they are afraid to take that first step and put themselves out there and allow themselves to be seen. And so I think really kind of bringing in some grounding practices from my yoga background and having that experience really helps me guide people through those fears that do come up when you are putting yourself out there and, feeling like you're in a vulnerable position. So it's a lot of helping people articulate their message, figure out the key aspects of their brand foundation while also helping them navigate those fears, and find what makes them stand out. So I think, when we're thinking of building a brand, it's really easy to get caught in market research and looking at what competitors are doing. But a lot of times, the most creative breakthroughs come when we're able to connect to what makes us who we are. And so that's, I guess, a bit of a little synopsis on the work that I do. And I'm really excited to talk more about that today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to to hear more about it as well. And first of all, congratulations on now having your own podcast.
Yes, thank you. It's been so exciting and it's been so fun learning the behind the scenes of editing and everything. So it's been really great. And I've had a lot of really cool conversations so far. So I'm excited.
I'm so glad that you have had so many, lots of cool conversations thus far, and I guess to flip this a little bit too. So yeah, so I know when we spoke in 2022, yeah, did you ever think that you were going to be one day hosting, your own podcast?
It's funny, because we spoke around the time that I was leaving Peppercom, the public relations agency that I was at. And I remember on that podcast episode, I was really focused on talking a lot about my experience at Peppercom because it really is a great agency. So if anyone is listening and interested in a career in public relations, I definitely thought Peppercom was a great place to work. And that's actually how I met Brandon. But at that time, I knew that I wanted to venture off and do something on my own, just because of the personal experiences that I was going through. I think right before we had met, I went on a retreat in Costa Rica and I had been investing in myself. So, kind of those fears that I was talking about that I help people move through, when it comes to building a brand, I was moving through those fears myself, around that time and kind of. seeing a different path forward for myself after investing in spaces that empowered me. And so I think at that time, I knew something was going to change, but I don't think I knew that I would have a podcast or that I would have become a yoga teacher myself. Actually, on that retreat I was on that I just mentioned, someone told me that they could see me becoming a yoga teacher. And I was like, what, me? No. And so definitely a lot of things have changed since then that I maybe wouldn't have expected.
Well, I'm so glad, first of all, that yeah, that some of the people there at your tree, just knew that you were going to one day, join being, as a yoga instructor, and so I guess asking even about like your personal, journey from then to now, would you say that you are in a much better place now?
Yes, I would. And I think that, when you are embarking on an entrepreneurial journey, it's really a lesson in personal development and personal growth, because in order to be able to weather the storms that are sometimes thrown at you as an entrepreneur and being able to deal with uncertainty and the unknown, and also I'm sure you can maybe relate to this as well in terms of having a podcast or putting yourself out there on social media and things like that, it is a very vulnerable thing to do. And so I feel like I have grown a lot in terms of, releasing the need for validation and all of those types of things that kind of come up as you're navigating this. And a huge part of my journey has been reflecting and refining and reflecting on maybe the areas where I might be holding myself back and how I can move through those and come out on the other side. So I definitely feel like there's been a lot of personal growth. And it all started back in 2022 around the time that we met.
I mean, it's crazy to think, sometimes in our life that, yeah, opportunities just come about and some things just sort of happen. I feel like in the way that it should. Now, whether it is immediate or takes the long scenic route, remains to be seen. But nevertheless, I feel like it all sort of works out in the end, and in the mysterious ways that it does.
I totally agree. And that's something that I think about a lot too is, how can you be there for yourself during, if you are on that longer scenic route and things aren't working out immediately? How can you be there for yourself and how can you change your perspective to see the opportunities that are being created or to see how far you've come? I think that's really important. Something that a mentor suggested for me. In the programs that I was investing in myself in a few years ago, she really spoke about celebrating yourself and celebrating all of the small wins. And I think that's so important on an entrepreneurial journey because I think our brains are hardwired to look for the bad and to look for what's going wrong rather than to look for what's going right. And so making a conscious effort to look at what's going well and, celebrating those moments really helps you along the journey and helps you when you are going through those periods of slowness and wanting to be somewhere that you're not yet.
I love what you mentioned about that too, of even sometimes taking the extra, the different perspective of the same events. And I know for myself, even looking back, over the last few years since I even started podcasting, in 2020, among other things, that I think it's very easy to see, okay, well, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. Oh, I was supposed to have this experience. Oh, no, wait, we had a pandemic now. I think it's so easy to look at things in that regard. But, for me, it was that year 2020 that I also started documenting much of my life and started
Mm.
having these podcast conversations. And I was able to look back at some of them and just see some of the joy I was just having of it and some of the things I was able to accomplish. It's like, even though it may seem like I've been doing this thing in circles, it's like I've been able to
Mm.
accomplish a lot more than I give myself credit to.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. I think a lot of times we focus on the bad, like I was just saying, but something I spoke about with one of my recent podcast guests was finding fulfillment in things outside of like money as well. I think that's also important. I think part of the reason why went out on my entrepreneurial journey is because I wanted to live a life of fulfillment and purpose. And although I really enjoyed PR and marketing and the people and the culture of the agencies that I worked at, I didn't love the topics that I was focused on. Like I was focused a lot on financial services and B2B tech. And while that was really great experience, and I'm grateful for that because I feel like it set me up for, other opportunities down the line, it wasn't something that I could see myself doing consistently. And I did have one bad experience at an agency that kind of like threw me for a loop. And caused me to kind of fall into like a hole of anxiety. I feel like I was crippled by anxiety for a bit after that experience. And it really just got me reflecting on my career and like what options I had. And I could have definitely looked for another job at an agency. And continued on in the agency lifestyle. But I was just so inspired by what I was seeing online. And I'm also, like I said, very passionate about wellness and just like helping people feel better, helping people feel seen and heard and understood. And so I really wanted to go down that path. And so something that I reflect on a lot too is finding those moments of fulfillment, regardless of if there's a paycheck attached to it. Because I think in society, we obviously like our survival depends on money. We need to make money to live, etc. So obviously, it's very important and it's valid. But I like to kind of take the approach of like, where can I find fulfillment in my life rather than, just pursuing something for the monetary gain.
100%. And I know sometimes we don't always have maybe, yeah, that option readily available, but I think it's something that we should always strive for, at least in my, yeah, personal thoughts. I know that for, yeah, for myself, some people always ask me, it's just like, well, yeah, what made you choose this and not this?
Hmm.
Or or are you sure that this is what you want to be doing? It's like, well, I never do anything that I don't want to do. And not to say in the sense of a, oh, here's some great opportunity, nah, but more so in the sense of that I always like being able to find a purpose in it, that I'm able to know I'm able to help others or help the community or give back in some manner, and that I'm able to get personal fulfillment from it as well. And hopefully, just like communication and, yeah, and friendship, it's a relationship that we have to be helping each other. And if it's broken, well, there's not much you can do about that.
Mm, yeah, definitely. I agree. And like you said, sometimes it's not immediately available to you to be able to kind of just like go chase after your dreams because, like I said, our survival does depend on money and we need to make sure that our needs are met and things like that. Um, but I think also when it comes to pursuing an entrepreneurial, I keep messing that up, entrepreneurial path is also like not feeling like it has to be all or nothing. You can always start on your passion projects on the side and let them grow naturally over time so that you make sure that your needs are supported in that moment. And then also something that I did to make sure that my needs were met as I was building my business is working freelance. So that's kind of when I got into the influencer marketing side of things. After leaving Peppercom, I started working freelance for a bit. And then I also took on a role more as a director of brand marketing at an influencer marketing agency called Higher Influence. And both of them were really great opportunities. I loved being a part of Higher Influence. While building my business, especially, using social media and thinking about like what's actually working. There's so much conflicting advice online about what you should or shouldn't do to grow online. And I think it takes time to build a brand. And so focusing on like quality over quantity and just like a bunch of different industry insights that I was able to pick up on while working there was really beneficial to me in building my brand. So I think that's another thing that I'll just say about my path is that um, even though I've gone off and I've built my own brand, Storytellers Grove, there are other things that I have done along the way to like make sure that I was supported in achieving these goals because I think it's always great, obviously, to continue to learn and be in the know. And so allowing myself to be in that environment for as long as I was really allowed me to learn and develop my skills. And then also just doing building Storytellers Grove allowed me to understand things on a deeper level, I think, because when we're working in agencies and we're working for other businesses, we may be like learning things, but I think the stakes are different when you're doing it for yourself. So you feel like a lot more invested when it's like something that you're doing. And so I think that that has brought a whole new perspective to the things that I've been working on as well. Especially having the perspective of like working with clients now, thinking about, okay, well, how would I want to approach this if I was doing it for myself? And I think that has been really powerful. And I think that along my entrepreneurial journey, it's probably been about 2 years now, but I feel like I have learned so much and so quickly. And the growth, like even you were saying, looking back on your podcast and seeing how much you have done over this period of time, it's something to be proud of. And it's exciting to see that growth.
It really is just so exciting. I mean, to see and experience the personal growth and fulfillment with it. And I like what you were saying too, that it's a bit different, doing it for yourself versus doing it for someone else, whether it be a company or a friend or even freelance, because you no longer per se have the question of what would I do if I was in charge. It's like, well, this is me. This is my journey. I get to choose
Mhm.
how I'd want to do it. And is there anything that that per se that you would do that you're doing differently now than how you would do it, when you were as a business person?
Mm. So when I was working in agencies, I would say in PR agencies, when I was in the influencer marketing, I was more in a leadership role. So it was a bit different there. But I would say when I was working in PR agencies, we were always in teams working on different projects. And we would always have like our VP would be like leading they would be the client lead. And then we would be kind of like supporting the client lead, getting the things done that we needed to get done. For that client. And so I think when I was in an agency environment, I think I just relied more heavily on direction from other people. And so I wasn't able to understand like why we were doing what we were doing and like what comes next, and kind of just looking for that guidance and then just kind of checking the box, being like, okay, they told me to do XYZ. So I did XYZ. Great. Now it's off my to-do list. Now I can move on to the next thing. But I think now as like a business owner, I'm able to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and how all of these things make sense together. Because I've had to figure it out. And another thing I will say is that I feel like you learn the most from your failures or from the things that you make a mistake on. And so I think when I was in an agency environment, there was less room for mistakes because I had, every time I worked on something, for the most part, I would send it to somebody else and they would review it and look it over. And then, of course, they would give me the feedback and stuff. But I think it's this, like I said, the stakes are higher when you are like publishing it. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. Like, the hindsight is like much stronger, I think, when it's your own project versus like working in a team and like working for like a client and having all of that supervision. And obviously I'm so grateful to all of my mentors that I had worked with in those environments, but I just think, kind of being thrown in the deep end and kind of doing it all on your own allows for you to like make those mistakes and learn from them in real time, because you're like, oh, I see why that would have been better, opposed to somebody else just being like, do this instead and like making the changes. I think there was a lot more like real time learning in that process.
Yeah, I definitely, like I said, fully understand that. And I know, even from the working side, for me and some of my work experiences, it's so interesting, like when, for certain decisions, it's like, well, it's up to the boss, to figure it out, and that we're going to work together on this. Whereas, as a business owner and as a, podcaster, it's like you have to make your own, decisions for certain things. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the decisions aren't as clear cut as you may think, even though it's like, well, obviously it's not clear cut, but it's even more of a, like a, well, I could do this one thing, and it might make a slight difference, might put me forward, but also might push me back as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of hard decisions to navigate as well. I think, especially too, like in the age that we're living in with social media and all the online advice, it's also like, who do you trust? Who do you listen to? And I think that's a whole thing to navigate as well if you're trying to build a brand in the online space, is like, how do I find the right information? And I mean, just going off of that point, I think the biggest thing that I've learned after doing this for 2 years now is I think so many people are looking for quick fixes or like quick growth hacks. And I think the best thing that you can do is really focus on the foundations rather than just trying to like scale and grow like immediately. I think, and that goes back to a lot of the work that I do, because I think a lot of people, they know what marketing is, they know what sales is, but then when it comes to branding, they're like, okay, it's like colors and fonts and stuff, but what else? And I think, setting the brand foundation, it's really getting clear on who am I? What do I want to be known for? What's the problem that I solve? How do I solve it? And how do I communicate that to attract the right people? And how do I do that in a way that builds trust with the audience that I am trying to connect with? And I think a lot of times people skip that foundational work of really getting clear on what it is that they're doing, what's their unique point of view, and how are they consistently communicating that in front of the right audience, and jump right into like the marketing tactics and like sales psychology and stuff. And like, not to say that marketing tactics and sales psychology aren't good, but it's just like when you jump into those before the brand foundation parts, it can get like really hairy and like confusing and frustrating because you're not converting people because you don't have that trust built up behind your brand. And so I think a lot of the things that we see online are these quick growth hacks that people start to chase, and then they like keep on doing them and then they're not working, and they're like, okay, like, well, what do I try now? I've tried everything, but it's just not, that's just not how it works. And so getting really clear on those like foundational elements first before becoming too obsessed with the growth hacks, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And, there's definitely a lot of thoughts, as I had with that I want to comment on. But first of all, I like how you said, how do I communicate that? Which is,
Mm-hmm.
so important, especially for, us in the communication field, directly or indirectly. I mean, because, sometimes it's not even so much of a, how do I do this? It's where a lot of times we have the ideas, we have the concepts. It's just, okay, but how do I tell somebody about that? How do I try to, not per se like sell it monetarily, but even how do I even deliver this message?
Yeah, totally. And I think, you know, again, going back to like my intro and everything, yoga, I think, is similar to brand strategy because in my experience with yoga, yoga has been a lot of like reconnecting to myself and, getting to the core of who I am. And then brand strategy on the other side is like, having that awareness of like who you are, what you're here to do, and then learning how to communicate that regularly in a way that's unique and makes you stand out and is really true to you. And so, something that I notice a lot with my clients is that a lot of times people do have the ideas, but they get really stuck in their head on how to communicate it and how to articulate it. And so, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is helping them practice sharing their message. So, I would suggest to anyone who has an idea, but they don't really know how to like tie all the pieces together, is like, just start talking to people about it. I think the best way that we can find clarity in these areas is to just have conversations with other people and see how it's landing. Because a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about today, I had this idea for Storytellers Grove back in like 2022 or whatever. And I had the idea of wanting to help people connect to themselves so that they can share their story and build their brands authentically. But I can't tell you how many times I second guessed that due to like things I heard from other people or just my own doubt or my own fear. And because of that doubt and that fear, it was really hard for me to articulate like what it was that I was doing because I kept second guessing it. And so I think the first step to being able to communicate what it is that you do, you have to have like clarity and confidence in that. And when it comes to confidence, confidence can it can be shaky, like one day you might feel really confident and then the next day you might feel a little less confident. And so it's also about like having self-trust, like trusting yourself and trusting your vision and allowing that to shine through rather than letting the fear and doubt come in. And a lot of my clients have said that one of the most like beneficial parts of working with me is just like sitting together and talking through all of these things, because then as they're talking about it with me and I'm able to kind of help them refine what they're sharing, it allows them to see their own value and get really clear on how to communicate that. So something that I was recently reflecting on is I feel like a lot of my work is like holding a mirror up to people and like showing them like how great their ideas are and helping them formulate that into messaging and creative campaigns and things like that so that people do understand what it is they do. And then when they have a need for their service or their offerings or products, they think of them right away.
I love that, and I love how you mentioned that it's almost like holding, yeah, that mirror up for them. And I like that you mentioned, how do you articulate, the vision and helping, like I said, your clients and those who approach you, with that, because I know we were speaking, a little bit before recording as well, is that like one of the things I like doing with my podcasting is even being able to help others who may not have otherwise tried to share their story,
Mm,
share it and to celebrate their story, and that it's not the same for every person. Some people it comes naturally. You just ask them a question, they can give a 30-minute explanation as to why they are this person and why they did the amazing things that they're doing. Whereas for others, you might have to provide a little bit more guidance and
mm.
and a little bit more encouragement. But I feel like the end result was just so worth it in the end.
Yeah, I mean, obviously my brand is called Storytellers Grove, so I love hearing other people's stories and helping uplift other people's stories. And I saw a post earlier today by Cindy Zaweski. I think she's amazing and get a lot of inspiration from her. She's an award-winning journalist, and so she has an Ascent Storycraft framework that she helps walk people through. To help them tell better stories. And today's her birthday, actually. And so her post was talking about how your story could be somebody else's survival guide. And I love that because, like I said, I love wellness and making people feel seen, heard, and understood. And I feel like that passion really just kind of like exploded when I went on that retreat that I was mentioning as well, because I was able to like sit in person with people and hear their stories and build community. And I think, hearing other people open up about their stories makes other people feel safe to open up about things that they have gone through and all of that. And so I really love to share open and vulnerably, but I know that like a lot of other people might not feel comfortable to do that. I think, there are various factors to why that might be the case. But yeah, I think everyone has their own like insecurities in a way where, I might feel comfortable like being open and honest and vulnerable in some situations, but then there might be another area like where I feel completely embarrassed or like afraid to show up. And so I think it's also about like leaning into your own personal strengths. Like there's a reason why I went into communications is because I love to talk. And it's a perfect fit for me. But I think also kind of part of the work in like yoga and like connecting within is also getting to know those strengths where you can go and utilize your strengths rather than putting yourself into positions where maybe like that's not how you want to like run your business or live your life. And so I think if it's someone who just doesn't want to do that and doesn't have any interest or need to, then they can find their other passions and strengths. But for someone who's looking to build a brand and they want to become more comfortable sharing those things, I think the best thing to do is to get back to the foundations, like I was talking about, and really outline like, what's my story? What's the story I want to tell about myself? Like, and then what are the supporting talking points that I want to use to back that story up? And like, what are the main things I want to communicate through my brand? And then I think, allowing yourself that space to brainstorm and ideate and get clear and confident in those talking points then allows it to happen more naturally. And also, another thing when it comes to like podcasting and stuff is I was just speaking with a client and mentioning guest podcasting as a strategy for them. And they were saying how they were nervous to put themselves out there and speak and everything. Which makes total sense. I know your podcast was the first podcast I was ever on, and I was definitely nervous to be on it. But since then, I've been on so many more, and I've now have my own podcast. And so I think the first step is always the scariest. So if it's something that you want to pursue, maybe find someone within your community that you feel comfortable with where you can have that first experience and, build that confidence, because I believe confidence is something that's built over time. It's not something that we're just born with. And so by taking those small steps to just practice and get more comfortable over time, it becomes so much more natural.
Absolutely. And yeah, and just to comment on a few of the things that you just mentioned, like about confidence, and we were speaking about earlier about trust, is that, for me, I now teach, public speaking. And one of the things that I said at the very beginning of the course was that, it's like, look, so for a little bit of background is that I had only been brought in as the instructor just a few days prior to the semester starting, which is maybe not the most ideal. And the instructor, and the students didn't even get my name until I said it to them. It just had blank as their instructor. But nevertheless, when I introduced myself, I told them, it's just like, I know, as of right now, you don't know me and I don't know you. But I hope that throughout the semester that I'm able to gain your trust, that you're able to grow your own confidence, and
Yeah.
that you're able to grow in your own public speaking skills. And that's what I want, that even though this may just be public speaking, this is a communication class. And my goal for you is that you end out this semester learning to become an effective and honest communicator.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing of feeling safe and trusting the people around you. I think, all of us can have some form of story where we felt like embarrassed, maybe giving a presentation or people looking at us and just feeling embarrassed. And it's funny too, like even just talking about building confidence over time. I remember my Com 101 class in college, which was basically just public speaking. And I remember being like, oh my God, I do not want to take this class. And I was so nervous and I was just horrified at the idea of taking a full public speaking class. And by the end of the class, I was like obsessed with public speaking. Like I still get my fears, don't get me wrong. I think any uh, seasoned public speaker still gets fears and things like that. But once I think the main thing for me too, that makes me feel more confident and comfortable is knowing what I'm going to say. I think that's why practice makes perfect, is because if you put me in front of a room and like I don't know what I'm going to say, maybe now I can wing it a little bit more. Like if you ask me to talk about brand strategy or my business, like I can wing it a bit. But like if you told me to give a presentation on a random topic and I didn't have anything prepared and I didn't know what to say, I would start freaking out. And so I think the biggest thing that helped me in my communications class, where I had to do all these speeches, was just like memorizing. I would practice, practice, practice. So I knew every word that was going to come out of my mouth. And then once I was in front of people, I was able to kind of like relax my nerves a little bit and be a little bit more like natural rather than like stiff and everything, and focus on like moving around the room and stuff, because I had that knowing in my head, like I know what I'm going to say, I won't mess it up. And so I think memorization, like when you're practicing these things, is like a really good experience to make yourself feel more comfortable. So I think that was a great thing to say to your students.
Thank you so much. And yeah, and one of the things I wanted to add on to that with is that I know you mentioned that you enjoy being able to help connect others with their inner selves as well, and that how
Mm-hmm.
yoga is able to help ground you with that. And of course, now you're a yoga instructor. So I did want to allow a moment for you to go further into that, and into like how that's able to help ground you, and help sort of pivot your journey a little bit to where you are now. I know that for myself, it was my graduate program that really helped bring me to where I am now. So I'm curious as to hear how yoga was able to do that for you.
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned briefly earlier, I worked at one agency that was a very toxic environment, not Peppercom, a different one. Peppercom actually took me back after that experience, and I was so grateful to them. Such an amazing culture, such great people there, and really great experience. But around that time, I was feeling very stressed in my career. And so I started to invest in myself, and that's how I ended up going on that retreat and everything. And so I think when I started investing in myself in like these empowerment containers, um, it was the first time that I ever really did connect to myself and think about like, what do I want? And it was the first time that I really felt empowered to follow that. And so something that I ask my guests on my podcast is, what is a childhood memory that you feel like encapsulates who you are today? And so one of the memories that comes to mind for me is like one day I was just driving in the car with my mom and my brother, and I remember just having this like existential thought of like, who am I? Like, there are all of these people on earth, and like, what makes me different than like other people, you know? And so I think that's just like a thought that I have explored a lot of like, who am I on like a deep level? And really like diving into like philosophy. Like I've read a lot of books by I don't know if any of you have heard of Young Pueblo, but he's like a meditator, and he has a lot of great books. And then also just explored, you know, the philosophy behind yoga. And something that's been really powerful for me is like somatic healing. Which is less so talking about our problems, but identifying the emotions and the feelings that we have inside of our bodies when we are experiencing something. So, in the example of public speaking, right? You might be in front of an audience and your hands are sweating, your like cheeks are getting red, like you're feeling like shaky, like you have all of these sensations that are coming up inside of your body. And so for me, yoga was kind of like the gateway to me understanding these sensations in my body further and how to maybe alleviate these symptoms, you know, like one huge thing in yoga is like not attaching a story to like what you're feeling, but just kind of like breathing to that sensation that you're feeling and just sitting with it and allowing it to be. And I think through that experience, I just learned a lot about basic human needs. And when it comes to brand strategy and like messaging and communicating in a way that resonates with people, I think a huge part of it is understanding human behavior and understanding like human desires and like what causes people to act a specific way and how your services can kind of bridge that gap. And so I think for me, the reason why yoga was so important to me is because it empowered me. I think all of us have gifts inside of us. I think, you know, we all have something of value to share. But I think sometimes we might hold ourselves back again due to like doubt and fear and like conditioning from society in terms of like, this is the way that you have to live. Like, these are the steps that you have to take to be successful and worthy and all of that. And so I think just exploring these concepts further and, you know, identifying limiting beliefs that I held about myself and my worthiness and reworking that, because I think a lot of us struggle with a feeling of unworthiness, you know, whether in any area of your life. And so, you know, being able to give that like love to yourself and to know that you are inherently worthy, I think was like really powerful for me and allowed me to let go of a lot of negative patterns and behaviors that I was engaging in. And I can just say, like, I mean, an entrepreneurial journey has its ups and downs, but compared to like where I was a few years ago, I feel like I'm like so much happier. Like, I have a much stronger sense of self. And I think having a strong sense of self only helps you in business, because going back to like figuring out what makes you stand out and those types of things is really beneficial. So I think it was really just like that journey of going within and checking in with myself and unpacking, you know, a lot of things. And I invested in a lot of spaces to do this. So, I mean, if anyone is listening and struggling with, you know, heavier things, like definitely reach out to somebody and find someone that you can talk to about these things, because I have found it like so powerful to be able to invest into myself and then to be able to actually see change in my life. And I think when it comes to embodying change, a lot of times it's like you have an idea in your head and you're like, okay, I want to live my life that way. But then it's like the day to day, how do you make those changes? And I think yoga allowed me to embody a more self compassionate view of myself and allow myself to take my time and get to where I want to be without rushing myself. And so I think it was just like all of that personal development work that just made me stronger and more um, capable of saying, you know what, I am going to go for it.
I love that, and I love that you mentioned that you were able to help embody that change.
Mm,
That you were able to see, even where you started off and how you've been able to progress forward. And I know even for myself and the time that was that we spoke, I had started and finished my master's program, and I know for me doing that, it allowed for me to better identify with the self that I wanted to be like in elementary school. That I was like,
mm,
well, it's like I want to, at the time, I wanted to grow up to teach. I wanted to have a business that did something with media, so to speak. I wanted
mm-hmm.
to, and I, in my one of my dreams too was that it's like, well, I want to have friends like all over the place. It's like there's no rationale behind that. I didn't even per se even want to visit the places. I just wanted to have friends all over the place. And sure enough, now like at 22 for me, like I'm teaching my own class. I have finished my master's program. That was something that I was researching. Graduate programs way back then. I hadn't even finished elementary school yet. That
Oh,
and now having this podcast and having spoken with people, internationally, even it's one of those things where it's just like I never thought I was actually able to uh, fulfill all of this, especially in such a short, relative time. And so it's one of those things where it's like wow, it's like you never really know what it will be, that one thing that will trigger you to almost accomplish the things that you wanted to accomplish somehow. um
mm-hmm.
and so I'm so glad that yoga was able to do that for you and help provide a path forward, especially when leaving that one opportunity that didn't work out for you.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think I love that you shared that about wanting to have friends all over and how you're researching your graduate program and things. Because the reason why I asked that question, like on my podcast, is because I think that we're all born with these gifts and we're all born with our passions and our interests. And that's a huge reason why I want to help people connect within and like remember that, because I think, you know, we all are born with our gifts and our interests, but we live in a society where we're told you have to do this and you have to go to school and you have to get good grades and you have to go to college and you have to get a good job and don't be an artist because then you'll be struggling and all of those different types of things. And so sometimes because of the world that we live in, we shut ourselves off from following those interests and following those passions. Just for the sake of our survival. And I think, obviously, like I've said, we have to make sure that we have our needs met, but also how can we live a life of purpose? And maybe if you're in a 9 to 5 job, maybe that just means like finding a hobby on the side where, when you clock out of work, you feel like you can actually clock out and like enjoy your time. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you have to just give up everything and do something on your own, because maybe that's not for everyone as well. But just like finding those passions and interests and following them in a way that makes sense for you, whether that's as a career and building a business, or it's just like a hobby or a passion project.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and I'm so glad, like I said, that you mentioned that and that you asked that question to, like I said, to your guests. And I definitely want to follow back up on that. But I want to ask too. So since you are working with your clients, of course, to make sure that they are able to not just live a life of purpose, but then also to make sure that their brands are able to do that as well, and that they're able to, as you mentioned in your first episode, Storytellers Grove, that you're able to make it where if their company or their brand says that they're doing one thing, that they actually follow through with it, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask, so how have you been able to progress, and follow your life of purpose while helping others do that as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as humans, we all love to just help others. I think all of us get a sense of fulfillment when we feel like our actions have bettered somebody else's life. And so I think, in terms of me living a life of purpose, one, taking the chance on myself and taking the road less traveled and building a business, I think has been fulfilling. It's definitely had its ups and downs. And, sometimes I have had moments where I've thought, oh, maybe just working a 9 to 5 job would have been easier. But I still get the fulfillment out of it. Like, I still love the work that I do every day. And, um, I think if I was working in a 9 to 5, I would feel a little bit more trapped personally based on just like the experiences that I've had since leaving a 9 to 5. Um, and then also just like helping my clients. There's one client that I've worked with for about a year. We recently just finished up on the work we were doing together, but even just thinking about, and I'm by no means am taking credit for her entire transformation. That was all her as well. But just like knowing her for the amount of time that I did and like seeing the growth and seeing how much more confident she is, just like in general, really excites me. And I'm like so happy for her. And I've built such a great relationship with her that like genuinely on calls sometimes I would just be like tearing up, seeing how excited she was about the business and brand that she's building, and also seeing how much she has grown over time as an outsider. Because I think sometimes like even like me, right? Like I'm sure my old mentor would be like, Amanda, you have changed so much. It's like so inspiring. But like when you're the one going through it, you're like living through those daily moments of change where you might not recognize your growth as much as somebody else from the outside looking in does. So I'd love to help people like, transform how they feel about their business, how they show up in their business, help them become more confident in articulating what it is that they're here to share. Um, and then on top of that, like doing yoga has been amazing for me. It's something that I just love and wanted to dive deeper into. And I'm excited about in the future hosting more events and like retreats and things like that. It's a goal of mine to be able to host like business retreats where it's part yoga, like part business workshops and things like that. So I think, just being able to see my vision kind of take shape and evolve over time has been so amazing. And like even just one example of growth is last January, I hosted a virtual retreat with 4 women, which was great. But it was like the first time doing it. So the attendees were less than we had wanted. And the, process behind planning the event felt like a lot. But now this coming February, I'm also planning to host an in-person event. And I'm really excited. I feel like our chances of selling out are very high. And so I think that's just like really exciting. Going from one event that I hosted last year where the turnout was a bit lackluster. I was a little disappointed. We did have attendees, but I just kind of wish that there was more. And now it's exciting that a year later, I'm able to kind of do it again, but do it in person and, have that community feel that I was looking for, and just like allowing myself to see my vision grow and evolve over time, I think is really nice and exciting.
That's so, like I said, amazing that that you have that, like I said, event coming up. I hope it goes, well for you, and that you're able to even have that sort of that trial and error moment too, where it's
Mhm.
just like, okay, I'm planning this, and okay, well, maybe there weren't as many attendees, and it's also the first time, and I know, I think a slight benefit of doing things like with an organization or group, or at least with a friend or partner or whatever, is that at the very least you have someone else to talk to and be like, oh my gosh, this is not going the way that I want. But I'm glad that you were able to stick with it and try again, and this time, in person as opposed to remote, and that hopefully it all works out with the sold out attendees that hopefully all follow through.
Yeah, and definitely, if anyone's listening, follow me on Storytellers Grove and keep an eye out if you're in the Seattle area.
And I did want to ask too, since you mentioned the Seattle area. So what actually brought you over to the Seattle area? I know when we last spoke, you were in New York.
Yes, so I grew up in New York. I'm originally from Staten Island. And then for college, I moved to Manhattan and stayed in Manhattan for 8 years. And I loved my experience living in New York for college. It was super fun, and I met so many cool people. But then living in New York through the pandemic, me and my husband were lucky to have a terrace in our apartment in the city. So and it was like a great apartment. We loved it, but we were locked into like a 2 year lease, and then after the 2 year lease, the rent was skyrocketing. So on top of like we knew that if we were to move out of that apartment, we knew that we were going to have to downgrade in terms of like our living situation because New York is so expensive, and we were just so lucky to get such a good deal during the pandemic and kind of ride it out. And so when we were thinking about moving, because we knew we were going to have to, my husband suggested, "Would you want to move somewhere else, maybe on the West Coast?" And then because I had been in those empowerment groups that I was talking about, I was like, you know what? Yeah, why not? I'm going to live my life for me. And I think if I didn't do those empowerment groups, I would be like way too afraid to like leave my family and all of that. And I do miss my family a lot, but I do love Seattle so much. And the main reason we moved out here was for a better quality of life because New York is just very expensive, and we felt like we were making more money throughout our careers, but we didn't really feel like we were able to like see that in terms of our quality of life. So I also like love nature. I love hiking. I love just like being outdoors and everything. So I think also just having more access to nature, being able to have a car versus like living in Manhattan and just taking the train everywhere and feeling stuck in the city. And so, yeah, that's what brought us here. And I love Seattle.
I love that. And I'm so glad that you were able to find a new location that also fit your new lifestyle as well.
Yes, definitely. It's definitely much more laid back compared to the East Coast. And so I love being on the West Coast. Me and my husband talk about hopefully one day being able to kind of like split our time between the coasts. That would be our dream.
That's amazing. But yeah, I'm so glad that that you're able to, like I said, find a new, like I said, a new location, and also try to, I mean, to work to not just throughout this conversation, as you mentioned, work to become more grounded, to speak with new clients, to meet new people, and it actually fits into. I don't know if you had a chance to re-listen to it, but fits into our theme of even our last conversation, which your theme of that was life keeps moving.
Yeah, life does keep moving. And yeah, you have to send me the link of that episode because you sent me Tansson Talks and I was trying to find it, but I was like, I think it was the old show and now I can't remember where the link is. But I definitely need to go back and re listen. It would be so nice to hear like how much has changed between that episode and this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I know even when we spoke, on April 18th of 2022, I know by the time we hit, its release on May 20th, I know you already told me it's like, oh, well, pretty much everything I said has changed since then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cause that was like right around the time that I was transitioning to more of a freelance role. And like I've said in this conversation, I love Peppercom. So I wanted to, talk up Peppercom for all of your listeners at the time, because I do think that it's like one of the best PR agencies to work at, especially like from my experiences working in agencies that were not as great. I think Peppercom really does have like a really great culture. And so it was interesting for me to be in that conversation because I kind of had like one foot out the door, but I was still excited to kind of promote Peppercom and talk about my experiences that I had there. So that was definitely like a funny time for that.
Yeah, and then even on my side as well, it was just a few episodes later after that I decided to shift my own podcasting from my audio podcast I had two at the time to having
Hmm.
one video podcast starting the next year, and so it was funny like how that aligned with both of our sort of uh, not per se pivoting, but more so us evolving in our personal journeys.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's so nice that we're able to reconnect now and chat about everything that's changed and be able to recognize each other's growth because what you're doing is really cool too. Like, I'm looking forward to eventually having 95 episodes, and that seems far away right now. So, congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. And yes, I'm so glad what I said that you had reached out. And I did want to ask too, how is the process for you being able to help tell the stories of others through, your podcast? And how has the process been, with podcasting? I believe as of right now, as of speaking, that I believe you have 7 episodes out.
Yes. So, it's been great. I have really enjoyed the episodes where I'm interviewing people, but it's currently a mix of like 2 episodes per month are sharing other people's stories and things. And I focus a lot on sharing stories of people in like the wellness community or like communications or brand strategy, because that's really the focus that I am in. And it's just been like really great to learn from people. Like I recently just had a recording with someone who is a web designer and SEO expert. And learning from her was great because I had so many questions about my own personal SEO journey and trying to figure out like what should I be paying attention to and all of that. And so having a conversation with her has been so great just to like have the opportunity to learn, and then also connecting with people on their stories. I love to ask that question about their childhoods because I think it gives like a little sneak peek into like who they are, and it's just a fun story to include in the episodes. And then the solo episodes have been great. I think when it comes to the individual episodes, there's definitely like another layer of vulnerability because I'm like, when I'm editing and listening back to them, I'm just like, oh, well, I could have said this, I could have added that in. And sometimes I will go back and edit and like record in a little piece. But other times I'm like, you know what? I'm this far into the editing process. It is what it is. Maybe I'll say it in a future episode. So I did work with a podcast manager for the launch of it, which was great because she kind of showed me the ropes. And now I'm kind of just like in the process of learning the editing and production part myself, because I think with anything that you're doing, it's good to have an understanding of it all before fully outsourcing, because then if something's going wrong, you have your own knowledge rather than only relying on like outside expert opinions. You have like something to go off of.
Well, I'm so glad that I said that you were taking a hands-on approach, to the process thus far, and I like that you mentioned that, before even considering outsourcing, that you want to know the process, learn the process, and no, I know my personal running joke is like, one of these days I just need to hire an editor for this, but
Yeah.
I so love, being able to personally go back and to learn about it and take my own notes, as you can see me with my pen here. I mean, I love being able to do it myself. And I know one of these days it's probably going to become a lot to try to edit each of these individual episodes. But for as much as I can, I know I love and enjoy it. And I wanted to ask too. So, how was it for you? I know you spoke a little bit about this. How was it for you being able to share your own story on on your platform as opposed to helping others tell their stories? And then how is it to be able to tell your a little bit more of your story, update it here on my podcast?
Yeah. So I feel like my story I have been sharing for years now in different ways. I've taken things out, I've tweaked it here and there. But I feel pretty comfortable sharing my story at this point because I think it's the most like basic thing that I've shared, I guess. Like it's like the most common, maybe not basic, but it's the most common questions that you get asked is like, how have you gotten to where you are today? So I feel like that felt really natural. But as I mentioned, I worked with a podcast manager for the launch of the podcast. And the first episode of Storytellers Grove is actually an interview with my podcast manager that she just edited together. Like she removed her parts and edited it together because when I was originally recording the first episode, I felt like the way that I was speaking was like very unnatural. Like it kind of sounded like I was giving like this like empowering speech. So like the content was good, but it was just like not the kind of vibe that people are used to when they're listening to podcasts. Podcasts are usually like very casual, like you're just having a conversation. And so that was an exercise that she did with me to get me more comfortable in terms of just kind of like speaking as if I was talking to somebody else when I'm doing those solo episodes. So that was my experience sharing my story on Storytellers Grove and everything. But I think when it comes to helping others tell their story, I think I do that mainly with my clients for the most part and helping them work through those details. And so it's a lot of helping them find what makes them unique and what makes them stand out and how they can communicate that. So I do that in my North Star program with clients. And then I also have a strategic visibility package, which helps people expand their message through like PR and things like that, like pitching yourself out to be on podcasts. So I think that's really exciting. And a lot of people have fears around putting themselves out there. So a lot of it is working through those fears. But when it comes to having guests on my podcast, I think it's also just really exciting to hear their stories and provide space for them to share their own thought leadership. A lot of the people that I've had onto my podcast, we don't really do any prep or anything like that before. It's just kind of like we come on, we have a conversation. I give them a gist of the questions that we're going to talk about. But for the most part, we kind of just like let it go naturally. And so that's been really fun to just connect with people. And then, yeah, sharing my story on your podcast has been great. Like I mentioned, like just being able to reconnect with you after these 2 years, learn more about where each other are, and also be able to share my story in front of your audience is always exciting. You know, when you're building a brand, I think one of the main things that you should consider is how do you make yourself more discoverable. And so through coming onto podcasts like this, I'm able to leave my footprint in different areas. And that way, when people do feel the call to reach out, they feel connected to me because they've heard my story in a more intimate setting. So I'm really appreciative to opportunities like this. So thank you for letting me share my story.
Of course, and thank you so much, like I said, for coming on. I have so enjoyed, like I said, this conversation, being able to reconnect, with you after 2 years as well, almost 2.5 at this point. But yeah, and I love that you mentioned too that your original first episode was a conversation with your instructor, sort of piece cut off, because I know for myself, it was funny. I started off podcasting, being just myself, and then it was such an adjustment trying to, to have guests on originally, but my first guest was amazing, and so it was like seamless. But then going back to doing solo episodes after that was like, oh my gosh, how do I speak to myself again?
Yeah, it is really funny. It's hard to, especially you want to make sure that what you're saying like makes sense and it flows and all of that. And so I think for me, I was getting too caught up in the scripting process, and then like I would write a script and then I'd just be reading it, and so like it's like it sounds different when you're reading versus speaking. But I think now that I've recorded at least seven, I mean I've recorded more than 7 episodes. There's just some that are in the backlog to be edited. And so I think it's becoming more natural now that I've had more practice, and I'm grateful to have had her help me with the experimentation and trial and error process. It was great.
I'm so glad, and I definitely am so excited to hear how you're able to continue to progress with your storytelling, and like I said, with your brand as well. And is there anything else that you wanted to discuss while we're still here before we begin closing out the episode?
I would just say if you are feeling stuck in your life right now and you want to make a change, maybe first start by investing in yourself with in whatever way that you can. Maybe it's like going to therapy or, investing in spaces that uplift you. That could be anything. It could be a hobby. It could be anything that has to do with community and allowing yourself to connect with others and find what lights you up. I think, you deserve to live a life of purpose and fulfillment. So seeking that out where you can. And then if anyone is interested in learning more about the work that I do and how I help my clients build their brands, I think I shared my website with Brandon, but I have information on my services there that I've mentioned in this call, North Star and Strategic Visibility. And then you can also follow me on social media at Storytellers Grove. And Also, if you want to check out my podcast, those are all of the areas that you can find me and learn more about this work that I'm doing. But yeah, other than that, I'm just so grateful to be here today. And I'm hoping that everyone listening takes something of value out of this conversation.
Well, that's amazing, and also I love that you actually answered it in the way that my actual last two questions usually are.
I wasn't sure if there was going to be another question or not, so I figured let me say it now.
Perfect. In that case, I'm gonna actually change up my ending a little bit and say, so to close us out, what is something about yourself that most people don't know that you'd want them to know, and you might potentially cover in your podcast?
Hmm. What is something people don't know about me? Well, like I mentioned, I'm pretty open and vulnerable online. So I feel like I kind of lay it all out there. But something that I would say in terms of just like, I feel like something that I guess shocked me from feedback that I got from people when I started my being on more podcasts and launching my own podcast is so many people told me that I'm such a great speaker. I articulate things really well. And I think I was like a little bit shocked by their reaction to it. And so I think, a lot of times we block ourselves from seeing the things that we're really great at or we're really good at. Um, and so I would say, like, if you feel like you're not good at anything or you're struggling to figure out like what your gifts are, just trust that you have them and maybe you are blocking your own ability to see them. And, it can feel really scary to put yourself out there and things like that. But when you're able to put yourself out there, you're able to have these experiences where people come and compliment you on things where you may have not even thought like, oh, that's like it's something that like I don't really think about. And it's something that you mentioned on this call a few times today, is that some people just aren't able to articulate these things. And I think for me, a lot of times I overlooked that and didn't really see it as a strength. Meanwhile, it is one of my strengths. And since uh being told that, I was able to kind of lean into that a bit more.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show, for all of your support, and I'm so excited to continue to stay in touch and to support your amazing show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated the chat today. I'm really excited to listen to our first original episode and reminisce. But yeah, it's been so nice reconnecting. So thank you again for having me here today.
Of course, thank you. And so for those tuning in, thank you so much as always for tuning in every week to the Tansson Talks show. I always appreciate your support and continue tuning in every week as we continue on our mission to bring people together. See you next time. Take care.